The door I already knew. The hotel receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the marble lobby, not the chandelier overhead, not even the faint smell of expensive cologne that reminded me of my husband. It was her eyes. She looked down at her keyboard the moment I walked through those glass doors, and something about that small guilty movement told me everything I needed to know before I even stepped into the elevator. "Room 714? I said. Not a question. She nodded, still not looking at me. I had been to the Hargrove Hotel exactly once before, 3 years ago, for a colleague's retirement dinner on the 4th floor. I remembered thinking it was the kind of place that charged $72 for a pasta dish and expected you to feel grateful for it. Tonight I wasn't thinking about pasta. The elevator was slow. Floor 1. Floor 2. I stood very still. My bag was over my left shoulder. In my right hand I carried a manila folder, the kind you'd bring to a quarterly review meeting. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make a stranger look twice. Floor 7. The hallway was quiet. Cream carpet, gold wall sconces, the soft hum of an air conditioning unit somewhere behind the walls. Room 714 was at the end. The door was unlocked, which told me either Daniel was careless, or he simply never imagined I would come. Pushed it open. Daniel was standing near the window, jacket off, glass of whiskey in his hand. He froze the moment he saw me. His face went the color of old ash. Beside him, sitting on the edge of the bed with her heels still on, was a woman I had never seen before. Mid-30s. Confident posture. The kind of woman who had clearly never expected to be interrupted. There was a long silence. Then she laughed. It wasn't nervous laughter. It was deliberate, the kind meant to establish territory. What comes after is very quiet. I still think about my mother sometimes. The way she used to fold money into birthday cards, even when she didn't have much. The way she said, "Put it somewhere safe, Lily, just in case." She was not a woman who trusted easily. She had seen enough of life to know that security is something you build deliberately, carefully, in small amounts over a long time. She built it for me. And I used it exactly the way she would have wanted. Not to fund someone else's Friday nights, but to rebuild a life on ground that was entirely, permanently mine. I am 37 now. I still work in finance. I still understand numbers better than I understand most people. I have a 2-bedroom apartment, 2 dogs, and a Friday night routine that belongs to no one but me. If you are somewhere in the middle of your own story right now, if you are still in the documentation phase, still sitting quietly with information that the other person doesn't know you have, I want you to hear this. Clarity is not cruelty. Protecting yourself is not revenge. And the most powerful thing you can do when someone has underestimated you for years is simply to let them keep underestimating you. Right up until the moment you place the folder on the table. You don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to be prepared. If this story stayed with you, if any part of Lily's journey felt familiar, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from today. And if you know someone who is quietly going through something like this, share this video with them. Sometimes people just need to know that calm, strategic, and prepared is a valid way to fight back. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is for people who believe that the most satisfying endings are the ones that are fully, completely earned. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. New video every week. I'll see you in the next one. The civil filing attached to the divorce petition. And a single highlighted bank statement. The first transfer, made 11 days after my mother's funeral. I said 2 words before I left. Read it. What Friday nights cost him. The financial crimes unit moved faster than I expected. Within 3 weeks, Daniel's primary brokerage accounts were frozen pending investigation. His firm was notified. Standard procedure in fraud cases involving licensed professionals. His partner Marcus called me once very carefully to ask if there was any way to resolve this privately. I referred him to Caroline. There was no private resolution. The divorce proceedings ran parallel to the criminal investigation. Daniel's legal fees began immediately on 2 fronts. His attorney, a man he had used for property deals, was replaced within 2 weeks by someone significantly more expensive. Renata stopped returning Daniel's calls approximately 4 days after the hotel meeting. Apparently, a man facing wire fraud charges and 2 simultaneous legal proceedings is considerably less appealing than a man spending freely on Friday nights. The criminal case resulted in a plea agreement, no prison time, but full restitution of $74,000, a criminal record, and a 5-year suspension of his real estate brokerage license. The civil divorce settlement recovered the restitution funds, a percentage of the marital property, and my full legal fees. The house sold in spring. I took the dogs. There is something nobody tells you about the end of a betrayal story. They tell you about the anger. They tell you about the shock, the sleepless nights, the moment you find out and feel the floor disappear beneath you. What they don't tell you is what comes after all of that. When the legal documents are signed, when the accounts are settled, when the last box is moved out of a house that stopped being a home long before you admitted it. Caroline filed the formal complaint with the State Financial Crimes Unit. A separate civil fraud filing was prepared simultaneously, attached to the divorce proceedings the moment I initiated them. We documented every transfer, every signature, every date. We obtained the bank's internal authorization records through legal discovery. We cross-referenced Daniel's private account with property transaction records from his brokerage. What we found was an additional layer I hadn't expected. 2 cash payments to a short-term rental account, both made on Friday afternoons, both consistent with the Hargrove Hotel's corporate billing structure. He had been using my mother's money to fund the affair. I want you to understand the precision required to sit with that information for 6 weeks and say nothing. To come home. To eat dinner. To ask about his day. To behave in every observable way, like a woman who did not know. I am a financial analyst. I understand that the timing of when you present information determines everything about its impact. You do not table your strongest evidence in the first meeting. You wait until the other side has fully committed to a position they cannot walk back from. On a Friday, deliberately a Friday, I called Daniel at 4 p.m. I told him I knew about the hotel. I told him I had known for some time. I told him I would be stopping by. He sounded relieved. The way people sound when they've been waiting for a confrontation and believe they can manage it face to face. He probably assumed it would be tears, accusations, demands to know why. I arrived at 7 p.m. Renata was there. I suspect he had called her for confidence, perhaps because he had already chosen which life he wanted and wanted me to see it clearly. I let her laugh. I let her say what she said. And I placed the folder on the table. Inside, a 2-page summary of the fraud findings. A copy of the criminal complaint already filed. She wore dark blazers and asked questions in the flat, efficient tone of someone who had heard many devastating stories and understood that her job was not to be moved by them but to act on them. She read through the transfer records first, then the signature authorizations, then the estate paperwork. She was quiet for a long time. "How long ago did your mother pass?" she asked. "For years," I said. "And you had no idea these transfers were occurring?" "None," I said. "I trusted him with the setup. I didn't review the statements. I was grieving and then I was moving forward and I simply didn't look." She nodded. "No judgment. This is wire fraud," she said. "The forged authorization signatures elevate it significantly. And the first transfer, when was it?" 11 days after her funeral, I said. Caroline looked up slowly. 11 days, she repeated. Yes. She made a note. A long one. The second meeting 2 weeks later was procedural. She walked me through the criminal complaint process, the civil filing structure, and the realistic timeline. "Once he knows you know," she said. "Assets move. People disappear. Evidence gets complicated. Right now you have everything. Don't give him a reason to start protecting himself before we're ready." I told her I understood. The third meeting was the Friday I had chosen for the hotel. She called me at noon to confirm everything was filed. The criminal complaint, the civil petition, the asset freeze request pending judicial signature. "You can go tonight," she said. "Everything is already in motion. Nothing he says or does in that room changes anything." "How are you feeling?" she asked. The only personal question she had ever asked me across 3 meetings. I thought about it genuinely. Prepared, I said. The quiet trap. What followed those 6 weeks was the most focused work I have ever done in my life. I drove home slowly. Speed limit exactly. Both hands on the wheel. And somewhere between the Hargrove Hotel and our 4-bedroom house, something inside me made a quiet, permanent decision. I was not going to fight Daniel for this marriage. I was going to dismantle everything he had built on top of my name. That was the moment everything shifted. Not in anger. In clarity. What the inheritance papers said. My mother had left behind $74,000. It wasn't a fortune. But it was hers, saved in small amounts over 30 years, set aside specifically for me, specifically in my name. The account was a joint access savings account at a regional bank, one Daniel had helped me set up during the estate process. What I did not know, what I had not looked at closely in 4 years because grief does that, it makes you trust the wrong people with practical things, was that Daniel had added himself as an authorized signatory during that setup process. I discovered this on a Wednesday evening, 6 days after the hotel. 11 separate transfers over 26 months. Some as small as $2,000. One as large as $18,500. All authorized by Daniel's signature. All moved into a private account I had never seen before. $74,000. Almost exactly. My mother's money. Gone in increments small enough that no single transaction would trigger a review. I sat at my kitchen table for a very long time. Then I opened my laptop and typed the name of the best financial fraud attorney in the city. The attorney. Her name was Caroline Marsh. We met 2 days later. I brought every document, the original estate paperwork, the account setup forms, the transfer records, the signature authorizations. I laid them on her desk the same way I would present findings to my own team. The first meeting lasted 1 hour and 40 minutes. She was exactly what I needed. Not warm, not cold, simply precise. Always charged to Hargrove Hospitality Group. Which sounded, if you weren't looking closely, like a business expense. I was always looking closely. The third anonymous message came in September. This time a photo. Blurry, taken from a distance but recognizable. Daniel and a woman, walking through the Hargrove lobby. His hand on her back. His head bent toward hers. I sat with that photo for a long time. I wasn't crying. What I felt was something colder and more focused than grief. It was the specific feeling I get when a financial report doesn't add up and I realize someone has been moving numbers when they thought no one was watching. That feeling I knew exactly what to do with. What they didn't know was, I hadn't even found the worst part yet. The laugh that changed everything. I want to tell you about the moment everything shifted because it wasn't the photo. It wasn't the anonymous messages. It wasn't even walking into room 714 and seeing Daniel's face go pale. It was the laugh. There is a particular kind of cruelty that comes dressed as confidence. The mistress, her name was Renata, I learned later, had clearly rehearsed for a moment like this. Or maybe she hadn't needed to rehearse. Maybe she was simply the kind of woman who had never been held accountable for anything and had mistaken that for power. When she said, "He loves me more," she wasn't just stating a claim. She was performing. She wanted me to crumble in that doorway. She wanted tears, raised voices, something she could describe later over dinner as the wife showed up and completely lost it. I gave her nothing. But I remembered everything. The exact way she tilted her chin upward. The half-smile. The way she crossed one ankle over the other like she was watching something mildly entertaining on television. And Daniel who stood there with his whiskey glass and said not one word. Not my name. Not an apology. "You're grieving," he said. "Let me handle the logistics." I handed him the documents. I have replayed that moment many times since. Not with anger exactly. With the specific quiet grief of understanding exactly when the door opened and why I didn't see it. Friday after Friday. The first anonymous message arrived on a Tuesday in March, 14 months before the night at the Hargrove Hotel. Came through Instagram. A blank profile, no followers, no posts. The message said only, "Your husband spends every Friday night at a hotel downtown. I thought you should know." I deleted it. I told myself it was someone with a grudge. I mentioned it to Daniel casually that evening and he laughed it off immediately. Probably one of the Connors brothers, he said. Don't give it another second. I didn't. For 3 weeks. Then the second message came. Different account, same blank profile. This one included a date. This past Friday. Room 714. The Hargrove. Room 714. Specific. Too specific for a random troublemaker. I started paying attention. Every Friday, Daniel left the house by 6:30 p.m. He always had an explanation. Client dinner, property walkthrough, drinks with his partner Marcus. The explanations were different every week, which I realized later was itself a sign of effort. Lies that vary are lies that are maintained. Truth doesn't require that much creativity. He wore Bleu de Chanel on Fridays. Only Fridays. I had bought him that bottle 2 Christmases ago. By the 4th anonymous message I had developed a system. Every Friday I noted Daniel's departure time in my phone, logged under a contact I named Project R. I noted his stated reason for leaving, his actual return time, and any observable details. I began cross-referencing his credit card statements. The Hargrove Hotel appeared 11 times over 8 months, always on Fridays, always between $280 and $340. What Ruth left behind. My mother was diagnosed in March. Stage 3. The oncologist used words like aggressive and responsive to treatment in the same sentence, which I later understood was his way of preparing us for both possibilities simultaneously. Her name was Ruth. She was 61 years old, 5'4", and the kind of woman who kept 3 different notebooks, one for grocery lists, one for phone numbers, one for things she wanted to remember. After she passed, I found the 3rd notebook. The last entry, dated 6 weeks before she died, said only, "Make sure Lily keeps the account in her own name." She knew. Even at the end she knew. The 14 months between diagnosis and her death were the most difficult of my life and, paradoxically, some of the most clarifying. When someone you love is dying, the unimportant things fall away with surprising speed. You stop caring about traffic and difficult colleagues, and whether your living room furniture matches. You care about time, about presence, about saying the things that need to be said while there is still time to say them. I drove to her house every Sunday. Sometimes Daniel came. More often he didn't. Deals, client calls, the general busyness of his life that seemed to expand precisely when I needed him to contract it. I did not fight with him about this. I filed it. My mother passed on a Thursday evening in October. Quietly, which was exactly how she had lived. I was holding her hand. Daniel arrived at the hospital 40 minutes after she was gone. He held me in the parking lot and said all the right things. The estate process began 2 weeks later. There wasn't much to manage: the house, some personal effects, and the savings account. Daniel volunteered immediately to help with the paperwork. Lily and Daniel, the love story. I met Daniel Harmon on a Saturday afternoon in late September, at a barbecue in someone's backyard that I almost didn't attend. My colleague Priya had been asking me for 3 weeks. "Just come, Lily. You work too much." Just one afternoon. I had canceled twice already. The 3rd time I ran out of excuses. Daniel was standing near the grill when I arrived. Not cooking, he didn't cook, I would learn, just standing near it the way confident people stand near things, as if proximity to activity is the same as participation. He was tall, well-dressed for a backyard, and laughing at something someone had said with the kind of ease that makes a room feel warmer. He introduced himself within 10 minutes of me arriving. "You're the one who almost didn't come," he said. Priya had apparently mentioned me. "I almost didn't," I agreed. "I'm glad you did," he said. Simply. No performance. I liked that. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. They were genuinely good years. He remembered small things: my coffee order, the name of my childhood dog, the anniversary of my father's passing. He showed up. That was the word I used about him to my mother. "He shows up, Mom." She met him 4 times. She was polite. She was never fully warm. When I asked her once what she thought, she paused for a long moment and said, "He's very charming, Lily. Just make sure you know the difference between charm and character. I thought she was being cautious. Mothers are cautious. I understand now that she was being precise. We married on a Saturday in June, 180 guests. A venue with string lights over an outdoor terrace. A first dance to a song Daniel had chosen. The photographs were beautiful. I have not looked at them since the divorce. The first year of marriage felt like an extension of dating. The second year felt like settling in. By the third year, I had started to notice the omissions. "So you're the wife," she said, looking me up and down slowly. "He talks about you, you know. Not the way a man talks about someone he loves." I said nothing. "He loves me more," she added. "He has for 2 years." I looked at Daniel. He still hadn't spoken. His mouth was open slightly, like a man waiting for someone else to write his lines. I walked to the small table near the window. I set the manila folder down. Gently. No slam, no drama. "I know," I said simply. And I walked back to the door. "That's it," she called after me, amused. "That's all you have to say?" I stopped, turned around one last time. "Read the folder," I said. And I left. The woman I was before this. My name is Lily Harmon. I was 36 years old when that night happened, and I want you to understand something before this story goes any further. I was not the kind of woman who falls apart quietly in hotel hallways. I had spent 11 years as a financial analyst. I started at a small firm in my late 20s doing risk assessments, and by the time I was 34, I was managing a portfolio review team of 8 people. I understood spreadsheets the way some people understand music, instinctively, structurally, pattern by pattern. Numbers told me stories. Discrepancies told me the truth. Daniel had a way of making me feel like my accomplishments were background noise. Not through cruelty, through omission. He would talk about his deals at dinner parties for 45 minutes and then say, "Lily works in finance too," as if that summarized it. He forgot my professional title consistently, even to people who asked directly. Once, at his firm's Christmas event, a colleague asked what I did and Daniel said, "She manages accounts." Which technically wasn't wrong, but felt like describing a surgeon as someone who works with knives. I noticed. I always noticed. I just told myself it wasn't worth the argument.